I just finished auditing the entire client acquisition system for a $9 million IT company that was looking to scale up to $29 million over the next 5 years. And the goal of it was really simple. It was come in as our chief revenue officer or virtual chief revenue officer and assess the whole system so that you can identify the bottlenecks and then create a roadmap and a plan to get from here, 9 million, to here, 29 million, or at least into the next phase of it. And today what I'm going to do is just open up the curtain and share what I look at and how I assess the entire growth system of a business to build these plans so that you can take this framework or this process and double or triple your own sales. Let's dive in. Hey, what's up? I'm Ray Green, former managing director of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and CEO for investor groups to lead turnarounds, and now a strategic growth partner for IT businesses and other B2B businesses. And typically when we start working with a new business, the very first thing that we're going to do is run our 360-degree sales audit. And that audit, like I mentioned, is going into the business as if we were a partner or an owner and we were responsible for getting the business to the goal that they want to get to. And these audits have to be pretty damn good because in some cases we hand over the audit, we say, hey, like this is what we would do. And they say, fantastic. We want to take that. We want to implement it. We want to run with it. And that's cool. Other cases, we have the audit and we create the plan. And then they say, perfect, let's do this. And we'd like you guys to help implement all of this. And a lot of that is based on performance and the actual growth of the business. So when we do these audits, we're actually doing them as if we are going to be the person that's going to be implementing it. And that's how we're going to be paid. So there is an element of strategy. We do bring back some strategic insights. A lot of companies are just missing like a cohesive, congruent strategy for growth. So strategy is included, but it's also very tactical. It's very actionable in terms of what we find and how to implement it because we find a lot of issues all over. Like every business has them. The question isn't how do you fix all of them? The question is how do you find the ones that are worth fixing? Right? And then how do you focus on those? And then in what order do they need to be fixed? Because the vast majority of things are fires that you could just ignore. And if you focused on 3 or 4 of the high leverage things, those are going to be the ones that propel the business forward by ignoring all this other stuff. So when we build the plan, it's not just, hey, here's everything that's wrong. It's, hey, here's all the stuff that we found. Here's how we would prioritize this. Like we would actually focus on this, then this, then this, then this, and make sure that we're working on the right thing at the right time. And then all of these things, we're just gonna let those fires burn. Now I've got a process to run these audits like consistently because we've done a lot of them. And I trust that this process and this framework is going to give me the output that I need to build that plan and get them to the goal that they really want to get to. So that's what we're going into today. Now, at a high level, there's basically 7 pillars. There's strategy, lead generation, lead nurturing, the handoff from sales to marketing, sales, the systems, like the tech, the systems, the processes, and the KPIs. Now, those 7 pillars covers a lot of area, right? Like we cover a lot of ground in this audit. And that's why it's a deep dive. And it takes 4 to 8 weeks to like actually do this comprehensively. So why are we looking at so many things? Over the years, I have learned that your business is basically a system. It's a system with a bunch of parts that creates an output, and that output is sales. Sales is the lagging indicator of all the stuff that's happening. And I equate it or I compare it to like a car, right? Like your business is like a car. And in a car, you've got a bunch of parts that are working together and the output is speed. And to get more speed out of that car, you've got to look at both the individual parts, like the components that are within the car. And then you've also got to look at how those components work together. If you just take all of the individual best parts for cars on the planet and try to assemble the car, it's not going to necessarily work the right way. The system has to work cohesively. So you can have a lot of really good individual parts, and then you can have a lot of really shitty connections and how they're integrated and still get a shitty output. So you've got to look at it and say, I want to drive more speed for my car. I've got to look at individual outputs, and I've got to recognize that when I change this thing, might change this thing over here, because that's the systematic nature of it. So what are all of those things, and how do we zoom out and say, we need to build the best system to get the fastest car? Same thing in your business, okay? You need to zoom out and look at all the parts that are driving the growth and driving the new sales, understand how they're working, and then how they're working together. And that's what I've learned over the years tend to be all of the areas that have all of the blind spots that you say, hey, we're installing this new marketing tactic, and you go, oh shit, it broke this thing over here in sales, or we're changing the sales process here and it screws up something over here. So that's how we take a look at the complete system and have absolute confidence that what we're diagnosing and what we're prescribing is going to be the solution. Now I'm going to go into each one of these pillars here. Okay, so the first pillar, strategy, that has what you could call sub-pillars. What are the areas within strategy that we're going to look at? Like instead of just saying, hey, strategy, good, bad. Like that's a nebulous concept. So when we say strategy, we're looking at a handful of things. We're looking at one, goals. Like, do you have goals? Are they clear? Are they communicated? Does everyone else understand them? So we're looking at the clarity of goals, segmentation and target market. Okay, so do you know who your audience is? Do you have a persona, an avatar, an ICP, an ideal client profile, a something? Like, do you have your markets targeted and segmented, and do you know who a good customer is? Then we look at the unique selling proposition. And the unique selling proposition is really a function of what makes you different. Most of the companies I'm working with, like IT businesses, all feel very much the same, right, to a customer from the outside looking in. So how do you differentiate yourself as an IT company? Well, a lot of IT companies will say, well, we have a USP, and that USP is we have somebody that picks up the phone live 24 hours a day. We have fast response time. We have good customer service. It's the same USP as everybody else. Is your USP actually different, and does it set your sales team up for optimal results, right? Does everybody know how you're positioned and what makes you different? Then we look at the offers and the packaging and the plans. In other words, do you have a great offer to bring people into the fold? And are your plans and your packages and your services, are they, productized and systematized and easy to sell, or is it all bespoke and custom and hourly? And the thing is, like, the plans, the packaging, all of that stuff are in many respects are the strategy of the business, because a lot of 7 and 8 figure businesses have like one offer. Right? They have one really good offer. That offer is the business. So the question is, do you have good introductory offers? Are your services and your offers and everything structured for your sales team to sell optimally, right? In other words, do you have a great introductory offer to bring people into the fold? And then do you have your services packaged, systematized, productized in order to optimize sales for the team? And then last, what we're looking at in strategy is basically like a competitive strategy. Like, we'll do some competitor research. We'll see who we keep coming up against in deals and how they're structured and what their plans are, what their markets are, what their USP is. So we'll do some competitor research. And what we're looking for when it comes to strategy is, have we put thought into making sure that sales and the sales team is set up with the right positioning and the right marketing and the right vision and the right goals from the get-go. A lot of times you try to fix things in sales, but these things on the front end, if they're not right, if they're not done well, if you haven't thought through these things, you can make changes to the sales process and the sales team all you want, but it's really a strategy or a vision problem. The next pillar that we look at is lead generation. Like, how are we bringing people in? How are we attracting the audience and prospects into our ecosystem? All right, so when we're looking at lead generation, we will take a look at the website. Right? Is the website, is it telling? Is it selling? Like, is it a cool billboard? Does it like something that looks pretty and looks fancy but isn't actually converting? Isn't actually generating leads? So is it a online business card, or is it an actual sales tool? And then the second pillar is lead generation. Okay. Now, lead generation has a handful of things that we look at. We look at the website. We look at marketing campaigns. We look at paid ads. We look at SEO. We look at lead magnets and those funnels. And we go through those and we evaluate those things. Now, here's the thing. I don't profess to be the best paid ads person on the planet. What I want to really know is less a matter of, hey, are we using the right creative? Or could we change the hook a little bit? Or, should we try a different channel or change out the audience on the back end? That's not necessarily what I want to get into. What I want to get into is, are leads being generated? And more importantly, are sales being generated? Okay, I want to understand how these things are performing in terms of the volume that it's producing and the quality of that volume, because it's super easy to fall into this, hey, we generated 20 leads this week. Okay, how many of them moved forward in the process? How many of them eventually became a customer? That's what's really more important, because I'd rather have one good lead per week than 20 shitty leads per week, because 20 shitty leads requires a lot of follow-up and a lot more volume on my end. One good one is actually less noisy. That's the thing that you really want to unpack. And then the second layer of that are some of the KPIs that are associated with it. So if you've got website, for example, right, is your website telling or is it selling? Right? Is it a, just a modern business card, or is it a conversion tool, right? Do you have conversion rates? Same with your lead magnets, same with your paid ads, like looking at the KPIs, but I do that after I actually follow this process through to see how much of that traffic is actually turning into new sales and new clients. And then the third pillar is lead nurturing. And what I mean by lead nurturing is largely like middle of funnel-ish type of stuff. So newsletters, podcasts, drip campaigns, anyone that's opted into your marketing ecosystem, I want to know, do we have assets that are nurturing those people on autopilot in the background, right? Like I have a list of 7,000 entrepreneurs on my email list. Every week I send one email. It's got sales tips and business tips, and it's not always, sales stuff, right? Like, so every week I'm sending a newsletter, I'm adding value. The objective of that newsletter is to just nurture people in the background, right? It's to stay top of mind. It's to increase the likelihood of being in the right place at the right time. Maybe there's somebody that's been on my list for 5, 6, 7 months, and this is the time that the message hits. And they say, you know what, let me reach out. It's to continue to build authority and credibility. Like if they continue to see the messages and they're like, hey, this is pretty good content. Like I actually like this. So I want assets that are working in the background and, kind of automated to a degree that are helping nurture people along in the process. Other things that you can look at are sequences. Like when somebody opts into your lead magnet, for example, what are the sequences that go out to that person afterwards? Like what's the series of emails that you send to that person? How are they converting? Right? Like, are those sequences doing anything? So it's a function of, one, do you have these things in place? Or are we just missing some opportunities? And then two, if you do have them, how are they performing? Like, are they actually doing their job? Are they moving people through the cycle like they're supposed to? And if not, like, how are we going to fix that? And then fourth, we have the handoff, which is what I kind of call the process of marketing to sales. Now, here's the thing. There's an SDR or BDR, are they in marketing or are they in sales? I care less about these things. Like there's some gray area in the middle. I care less about whether it's a sales function or marketing function. All I care about is this happening? Like the sales and marketing integration, is the handoff happening efficiently in order to maximize sales? Is it going to help you make more money? Is it going to help you get more customers? So we'll look at BDR activity. We'll look at SDR activity, other outbound stuff that you have going on. We'll look at BDR activity and we'll look at SDR activity and listen to some of those calls and look at those campaigns that they're associated with. If you're doing other prospecting activities, we'll take a look at that and say, okay, great. Are they working and are they getting the right things over to sales? We also look at speed to lead. Speed to lead is how quickly you respond to somebody that has opted into something or connected with you or reached out, right? Speed to lead may be, how quickly are you responding to inbound phone calls? Like, are you answering them quickly? Are you getting them to a salesperson quickly? It may be somebody that went to your website and filled out a form. Like, how quickly are you jumping on that? We'll also look at the booking funnel. If scheduling sales calls is part of your process, then you ought to have a process when somebody books that warms them up. Like, do you have an email sequence before that shares some content that maybe proactively addresses some of the objections that you usually hear on this call? Like, have you thought through the process from booking to the call or from this call to this call? We'll look at those things and audit that and evaluate, all right, how is marketing handing off to sales? Like, is this process integrated properly? And this is a perfect example of the systems-based thinking where you can have great marketing team, great sales team, but if they're not connected, it can be an absolute shit show. I've seen it countless times. Now, the next thing we'll look at, obviously sales, right? Like, this is a sales audit. So this is one of the bigger parts of what we're looking at. At a high level, the sub-pillars, there aren't that many. It's really, we're gonna look at the process, right? Like, we're gonna actually look at what sales process you have in place. Is it documented? And is it right? Like, there are a lot of times that we look at this and we say, hey, like, you're running, too short of a discovery call to get the information that you need in the actual proposal, right? Like, you've got to improve that process. Or maybe your process is too long for whatever it is that you're selling. We need to shorten that and save more time somewhere else or reduce friction. So we're going to look at the process and make sure that where there is friction, it's intentional. And are there ways to optimize this process to increase the throughput at each of these stages? Then we're going to look at the sales team, so we'll listen to calls, we'll evaluate the actual sales execution and how they're performing. We'll look at sales leadership. For a lot of businesses that are doing $5-10 million, a lot of times they have a salesperson or starting to build a sales team, but there's not much sales leadership. Like, we're not running pipeline reviews. We're not doing, sales meetings. We're not doing, call coaching. So, like, is there good functional sales leadership in place? And then we'll look at sales collateral, like sales enablement. Like, what are the tools and the assets that we've armed the sales team with to go out there and do their job? Do they have good slide decks? Do they have good emails to send people? Do they have the resources that they need to support their efforts to close more deals? And really what we're looking for is, overall, do you have the right process and system in place? And then how is your team actually executing that process? And then we've got systems. And systems is inclusive of both tech systems and people systems. And, we'll look at the CRM, like, we'll go in there and evaluate the pipeline health. We'll look at, different sales and marketing reports. We'll evaluate the dashboards. And well, what we're really looking for, like what I want to know is two things. One, do we have the reporting in place? Like, is the culture of data here and alive and well, or is this all still like shoot from the hip, Wild West, and instinct level like type of decision making? So do we have data, and are we at least trying to use that to make better decisions? And then the other piece is the right data? Because I oftentimes go into businesses that are doing 5, 10, 15, $20 million, and they've got a ton of data and they're impressed by it. Like there was a client that I had went down, they were super impressed. Like they had a workbook in Excel that had, 40 tabs at the bottom, and each one, and like they had them all linked up to each other. And I said, well, like, where do I go to find what I really want? Like, this is what I want. Like, if I'm going to look at your sales team perform, I need these 4 things. We don't have those. We have like 900 metrics, but we don't have the things that we need. So are we just lost in a sea of data? And do we have the reporting that's actually actionable, that tells us what we really want to know? Like, hey, we're doing X and we're doing a lot of that, and we say it's working, and it feels like we're really busy on it. Has it produced anything? Now, that's not to be short-sighted, like some things take time, but has it produced anything? And if it hasn't, what are we measuring to know if we're on the right path or not? That is the importance of the systems and the tech and everything else that you're setting up. You want it to change behavior. You want it to actually give you insights. So we're evaluating, is there data? Are there systems? And are they actually working? Are they giving you the insights that you need to make data-driven decisions, which makes you a smarter company, which means you grow faster? And then last, we look at KPIs. And the KPIs specifically that we're looking for are, all right, do we know, and can we verify like the lifetime value? Do we know what the cost of acquisition is? Like how much we spend to go get a new customer? And do we know that ratio, right? Like, do we know how much we're going to spend and then how much that customer is going to be worth? Because that ratio is really important, because if you don't have a really healthy ratio to begin with, scaling is not going to be good. Like if your lifetime value is half of what it should be and your cost of acquisition is twice what it's supposed to be, you don't want to scale that yet, right? So you want to look at that ratio and say, okay, do these numbers indicate that we're ready to do this thing? Then we want to look at what's the cost per lead, like how much does it cost us to get a lead, what the average contract or order value is. Different companies do it different ways. Sometimes you have projects plus MRR, they go different things. But do you know what the average contract value is? Do you know what your average MRR is? And how much of your budget are you allocating towards sales and marketing, right? Is it sufficient? Is it too much? Should you be getting better results on that? Like we want to know what the budget allocation is. And really what we're looking for is, are we ready to scale? Are we allocating enough resources to do it? What's the economic health of this profit model that we have, right? Like, do we want to double, triple, or quadruple this thing just yet? Or are there some changes that we need to make before we do it? And if not, like, what are those changes, right? Like, let's get those things taken care of so we can step on the gas and get this thing moving. Now, when you go through all these areas, you're going to find a bunch of stuff. Like, there's going to be stuff all over. Like, we could be doing this and we could be doing this. So then the question is going to be, all right, we just found 27 things to fix. Should we try to fix them all? Like, do we do the website first? Do we do should we change out the SDR stuff first? Should we fix a marketing campaign first? Here's the thing. You really want to prioritize these things so that you have the highest impact. You would be surprised at how many things you could just not touch and let those fires burn, and your business will grow actually faster than if you had invested the time to try to put out all of these fires and address every single issue. And I use what's a modified model of what software developers use to prioritize what changes they're going to make in software. So it's a really good model, because software developers have an infinite number of ways that they can change the software, right? They're getting requests, and they're getting input, and they're getting complaints, and they're getting some constructive feedback, and they're like, okay, well, there's like a million things to be working on. How do we prioritize it? Well, they use a model called RICE, and it basically comes down to reach, like what's the overall impact that it's going to have? Like, is it going to affect one person? Is it going to affect a million people? It's impact. Like, what is the impact that this is actually going to have on the overall results? And like, it'll affect a million people, but it's not really that important. Like, they don't really care that much. Then it's confidence. Like, what's your confidence level that you can make that change and that'll have that impact? Right? Like, this is a huge thing, and if it matters, it'd be big. I'm not quite sure that it's going to have that big of an impact. Like, it might flop, right? So what is your confidence level? And then what's the effort level? In other words, like, is this a heavy lift or is this a light lift? And we actually have a model that we plug things into, and because there's a formula that goes along with it. But you can just look at this and basically say, impact, confidence, effort. What's the impact this is going to have? on revenue specifically? What's my confidence level that it's going to have that impact? And how big of a lift is this? What's the effort level? If you evaluate those three things, it'll help you start to prioritize what should we focus on first. That's largely the process that we go through to do this, exactly that. Like we go through, we audit the entire system, we evaluate what things are there, then we prioritize what needs to get done and in what order. And we say, okay, here's the roadmap. This is what I would execute over the next 6 to 12 months to be on track from hitting where we are now, to where we want to be. And this is really how you get strategic about sales is, you're busy in the machine the whole time, right? Like you've got the car, like the hood popped, you are in the car all the time. And, sometimes you just need to zoom out. Like you need to zoom out so that you can see, the proverbial forest through the trees, right? And at least, hell, make sure you're in the right forest to begin with. So this is how you do that. You zoom out, you look at the systems, you break it down high level, and you prioritize what needs to change. And that's how you change the parts in your system from creating a $9 million a year output to creating a $29 million a year output. And you can think of this in terms of scaling your sales with strategy and with systems instead of just like tactical piece by piece and patchwork and band-aids that over time make the business clunkier and more complex and more challenging to scale. Now, if you want, I've got this exact framework in my sales toolbox, which is a library of resources that I have handpicked and put into one area. You can get access to all of them for absolutely free. And it is, questions to ask when you're hiring salespeople. It's how to forecast revenue. There's, a chief growth officer scorecard, how to, diagnose and troubleshoot your sales process. A bunch of stuff in there. This framework is one of the things that's in there. And if you want to grab that, there's a link to grab that in the description below. You just put in your email. Like I said, it doesn't cost anything. And if this has been helpful, I hope it has. If this has been helpful, subscribe to the channel and we'll get you more business and sales tips. Adios.